Welcome to What's New, live from the Nieux Society.
Thank you. Another edition of the Hecht Report.
The Hecht Report.
Live and direct. It's like between the two nerds.
So the last video we did, unfortunately we cut the best part out of it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start the second Hecht Report about your analogy, the way you look at New Orleans.
Well, through the lens of Yogurtland, actually it's changed a little bit, but there was a time maybe about like a year ago when things were really rough where I felt like every day was like getting up and going into Yogurtland and getting one of like the mixed swirl flavors, and you pull it down and one of the swirl flavors that would come down would be like delicious, like creamy vanilla, like with the fake like vanilla flakes in it, Madagascar vanilla. And then the other flavor that would come down would be dog shit. And you'd get a cone of that in the morning, and I used to try to lick around it and just get, you know, like the vanilla parts, and that didn't work. So now I just get up and I just like take a big bite of it and wipe my chin and pop a breath mint and like go on with life and enjoy the nutty flavor. And actually I think like the dog poop spout's running out, and like it's becoming more just like, you know, it's interesting. I kind of feel like we're on an upswing after having a couple of really rough years post-COVID. And actually, I know the topic today with the new police chief, I think, is part of that reason that I'm feeling more optimistic about my yogurt.
So the transition from the dog shit yogurt into optimism.
Yeah. Dog shit swirl.
Dog shit swirl.
Yeah.
That actually may be a trademark brand. On Wednesday, and Kirkpatrick was sworn in as the 52nd Chief of Police in the city of New Orleans. The first police chief was actually appointed in 1804.
Wow.
Ms. Kirkpatrick is the first woman, female, to hold the permanent appointment as the Chief of Police of the city of New Orleans. She has previously served as the Chief of Departments in Spokane, Washington, and Oakland, California. Today we just want to talk about your feelings about the new police chief as well as her challenges. Before we begin, though, a quick overview of the NOLA Coalition.
Sponsors, by the way, we have to thank the Nieux Society.
The Nieux Society.
The Hecht Report, sponsored by the Nieux Society. Refreshing and good for you every day.
Delicious.
Delicious.
Quick overview. You helped lead the NOLA Coalition about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. What is the NOLA Coalition?
So NOLA Coalition is probably the largest, most diverse kind of civic action group that we've ever seen in the city. We're now up over 550 organizations, about half nonprofit, half for-profit, black and white, Democrat, Republican, uptown New Orleans, East Central City, companies as big as the biggest banks, as small as small church groups, all dedicated basically to creating a better city for ourselves and our kids. We have two parallel goals. One is to create safer streets today. The other one is to invest in our youth for tomorrow. So on the first one, we're doing things like we advocated for a national search for police chief and for a doubling of the pay of the police chief, which is one of the reasons we were able to get Ann Kirkpatrick. And on the other side, we've raised over $6 million towards our $15 million goal. And we just came out with our first report on the first $2.3 million that we gave out earlier this year. Because we think that the idea that you get, which is that it's either, you know, lock everybody up with more police, or don't do anything for a generation, you know, to defund the police and just, you know, concentrate on social programs. That's obviously a false choice. Clearly, you have to do both. You need safer environments today so people can feel okay with their kids riding their bike or making groceries. At the same time, if you're not investing in education and mental health and physical health and affordable housing and just mentorship in general, then you're never going to be able to police your way out of this crisis. It's about supporting our young people. So we're doing both, and I think that message really resonated, which is why we have such a diverse and large group.
So what about Ms. Kirkpatrick? Her experience and leadership was attractive to the committee, and how do you see her as her opportunity here in New Orleans?
You know, the more I get to know Chief Kirkpatrick, the more pleased I am with her selection. I think she's exactly the right person for this moment. I think what probably sums it up, she was speaking at an event a few weeks ago, and somebody said, Chief, you know, how do you feel about being an outsider in such a strange place as New Orleans? And she said, Well, first of all, I'm always an outsider. It's what I do. I go into communities. I'm there to serve, and my job is really as a turnaround specialist. So being an outsider is nothing new. And she said being in, unusual places is nothing new. Like, New Orleans is definitely strange, and you have your own thing, but so do most places, right? She said the difference is that when you compare like New Orleans to Oakland, in New Orleans, you actually like the police and like each other. In Oakland, it was like weird, and they didn't like the police, and they didn't like each other. And so I'd much rather be here, which is weird and has its idiosyncrasies that you're going to help me learn. But fundamentally, New Orleanians have a love for each other and a respect for first responders that other places don't have. And I thought that was such an insightful answer, because it's true. Both statistically, we see that the public still supports our NOPD, even through the rough times. And just qualitatively, that at Mardi Gras, you're going to see police officers second lining along with the floats. Yeah. So there's a connection to the community. And I think as far as Ann Kirkpatrick is concerned, she'd much rather be dropped into this situation than into the acrimony and defund the police environment of an Oakland, which was not only dysfunctional, but just probably a much more difficult emotional environment to operate in.
So before we talk about the challenges she's got here, what did she do in Oakland? What was her story or turnaround story in Oakland?
I actually don't know that much about that offhand. I know that the end of her story is that she ended up being a whistleblower on some corruption and ended up getting fired as a result of that. And then later, the courts found out that she had done the right thing, determined she had done the right thing, and so she was exonerated. And basically, she fought against corruption even though it cost her her job. And so to me, that's a badge of honor. That's somebody who's putting service and duty above what's convenient. And so I actually, when I understood that, I took that as a positive.
So let's talk about the challenges she has.
Yep.
State of the city, crime, the police force. What's her challenges looking forward?
Biggest challenge, no doubt, is just the number of officers. At its height, NOPD had about 1,600 officers. Right now, we have, somewhere around 900, depending on how you're counting them. In my mind, we should be probably around 1,200 is probably the number that we might need to be at right now when we supplement with technology and with civilians. Again, to give some credit to where it's due, we've already begun a turnaround. So last year we lost about 120 officers, 121 to be exact. This year, looking at the numbers that the NOLA Coalition tracks, we'll probably just about break even, maybe lose a few, but it represents that maybe we've bottomed out and are coming back. Mm-hmm. And then if you actually look at overall crime statistics, the story is that 2019 was historically good. I mean, it was still far, too many homicides, but it was a 50-year low. So objectively it was, or relatively it was a good year. Then 2 years ago, we were the murder capital of the country, a really, really tragic, kind of a regression. This year, we're down about 20% in homicides, about 40% in carjackings. And so again, it feels that in terms of violent crime, whether it's for reasons what the police have done proactively, like getting guns off the street, or just the cyclical and viral nature of violence, we're doing better on that as well. And so I think that Kirkpatrick has the challenge of rebuilding the force, rebuilding morale, rebuilding the systems, but she probably is now coming in at a point where we're back on an upswing and she has to build on momentum.
So in your personal opinion, what would be her top priorities? Obviously, police recruitment, but you're asking Michael Hecht. What would be 1, 2, 3 that she should focus on?
Number one would be culture. Like any organization, culture is most important, I think, and it starts at the top. Number two would be recruiting and retention, because at some point you can't do more with less. And number three would be system optimization, meaning given what we got, how do we use technology? How do we use civilians? How do we rationalize and optimize to create a smaller, more effective police force? And by the way, and wrapping around all of that, I would put partnership. Partnership with the business community, partnership with Jefferson Parish, partnership with the state. And again, from what I've seen so far, she's already reached out to Sheriff Joe Lapinto, for example, in Jefferson, and I think she's, because seems taking at face value, she seems to be very interested in support and partnership, including from the NOLA Coalition.
I imagine having the NOLA Coalition there is an amazing asset.
I think she gets that. So the chief is coming to speak to us soon, and I think what we want her to understand is that here's this group that you're only going to see a group that looks like this up in the 300 seats at a Saints game. I mean, it is truly a cross section of New Orleans, or maybe out, on magazines on St. Charles during Mardi Gras. And this group wants to support her with time, with talent, with treasure, whatever it takes, because everybody is truly dedicated to the city.
Now, as the first female police chief, what's that say? What's that statement? Or what do you think about the culture of the police force or the opportunity here?
Well, I think that, again, we have to give a credit to the mayor for kind of pioneering that with Chief Woodfork. And Chief Woodfork has been very respected by the police force, has made progress in terms of recruiting and crime. And so now I think that Chief Kirkpatrick doesn't seem to be a person who dwells on those, I'm not going to call them superficialities because they do matter, but I think that she seems to be a cop's cop, dedicated to service, a person with a great education in as a police officer. She's also a lawyer, has been doing this for many decades, and I think she just wants to get the job done. And the nicest thing I heard about Chief Kirkpatrick was I was talking to one of the commanding officers in the police force, and just kind of, I wanted just to kind of qualitatively understand how it was going. And I said, so, how's it going? And the person said, I've seen more people come up into the chief's office to introduce themselves to her than in any of the 4 police chiefs that I've served. So there seems to be an enthusiasm, a feeling of accessibility that is greater than with any other of the police chiefs. And I take that to be a great sign that regardless of race or gender or age or background, that people feel that she is accessible and credible.
So last question, the NOLA Coalition has a nice, I think, a dashboard of metrics and goals. So if anybody wants to get sort of the core data, what are some metrics we're looking at? I mean, we certainly can look at homicides, but that is sort of an output. What are some metrics of early success? How do we know if it's working? Yeah,
so I think we know if it's working in ways that are quantitative and qualitative. So the quantitative ways would be I think the 4 categories of violent crime. And the MCC, the Metropolitan Crime Commission, on their website has all the stats on a weekly basis. So people should go to the MCC for that. The second quantitative factor is recruitment and retention, and that's the dashboard that the NOLA Coalition is keeping and putting out every month. The third one is that there is a group called the New Orleans Crime Coalition, different group, that every year does a survey run by Ron Fauché that asks New Orleanians qualitatively, what do you think? Do you feel safer? Do you like the police? Do you feel that it's gotten better or worse in your neighborhood? And that's the one that I think gives the overall assessment of the mood. And that's the one where we saw people's feelings of safety decline precipitously last year. And so we want to see it kind of coming back in future surveys where people are feeling better about their neighborhoods, better about the capacity of the NOPD, and better about the future. So that gives you a qualitative measure. So I think that those will give us indicators we can point to. But at the same time, Tim, it's just like the Supreme Court definition of pornography. We're just going to know it when we see it. We're going to know when things are going better. And I kind of feel like I'm beginning to see it. Not pornography, I better see it.
So let's end it back where we started on the swirl yogurt.
Yeah.
The shit side's melting.
Yeah, well, it's running out, yeah.
So what's the parting thought you want folks to be thinking about? Have we turned the corner? Is there a new cycle of safe, a safe city and optimism? What do you see?
I am, one is I suffer from optimism, but I am feeling optimistic about the city on a few levels. In terms of economic opportunity, there's as much now as there was post-Katrina. Our pipeline is full. I feel like the quality of life issues that were bedeviling us, whether they were violence or homelessness or pace of repairs on the streets, are getting slowly getting better. I just put all that together, and this feels like an environment where we're going to look back and say, wow, 2022 was really a rough year, kind of coming out of COVID and the echoes of that. But now we're beginning to elevate again. And I guess just after having done this now for a number of years, you beginning to feel those cycles.
Yep.
And you know what I'm saying, Tim? It feels like we're kind of coming into an upswing again.
Thank you, Michael.
So good.